Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. And it's my pleasure today to have two guests, two for the price of one, in Mervyn Dinnon and Matt Alder. Matt has been on the podcast several times now, but Mervyn, this is your first time on the podcast, so welcome.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, James.
It's all pleasure's all mine. And Matt, it's good to have you back. I think you're our most kind of. I think you're the guest we've had back more times than anyone else now.
Well, there we go. I must be doing something right, and it's a pleasure to be back again.
Great. Today we're going to have a little chat about your new book, Digital Talent, which has just been released. I can see a lot of kind of noise being made on the market about this, and everybody seems to be kind of raving about it. I must admit, I haven't had a chance to have a read of it myself, but hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll have whet my appetite, so I'm going to go out and line your pockets with a little bit more money from Amazon. But I tell you what, we have a lot of authors on here, and usually it is a solo sport. But the two of you kind of working together really interests me, and how you kind of divide up the labor of working and writing on a book. So how do you kind of write together? What's the process that you go through when you're kind of you writing it? Because this is your second book now, isn't it?
It is, yes.
So Matt, how is it you kind of work together?
Yeah, I think we're very lucky to start with, because we have a similar style of working. We have a similar style of writing. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's actually quite difficult if you read the book, to know who's written what. So that actually makes it easier for us, because what we've done with both books is we've literally just divided up the chapters and said, I'm writing chapter 1, Mervyn's writing chapter 2, whatever it might be. And we'll divide the chapters up. So I suppose to rewind a bit is, we'll talk about the book. We'll work out what it is that we think will be valuable to people. And also look at because we do a lot of research and write research reports together outside of writing books. So it's also like, what research have we done? What can we bring to the table? Then once we sort of settle on a topic, we then work out how that breaks down into a book, and then basically divide the chapters up and write them individually, but then come together, review them, and discuss as we move forward with the process, basically. Did I miss anything there, Merv? Give us some more insight.
I don't think so. We're the original asynchronous workforce, in that we're remote, we're hybrid, and we don't write at the same time. So I think that's a useful validation for how it works. Matt's right, and we've probably both got slightly different but complementary interests. Matt is a lot stronger, I suppose, around talent acquisition, technology, whereas I spend a lot of my research writing and conference going more around kind of, I suppose, the HR side, employee experience, talent development, talent management, internal mobility, those kind of areas. And so it comes together quite well. We both agree effectively what are the key points, the key strands, the key parts of the narrative that we're going to make. And then it's, as Matt says, the chapters are effectively divided up. We will probably write most of a chapter and then let the other person kind of have a read of it. What do they think? Are we going in the right direction? Are we kind of going off at tangents and stuff? So there's a lot of that as well. But again, we're friends. We've been doing this together for about 7-8 years now. So it's an easy relationship in that respect.
It sounds very democratic. Is there not just a natural leader between the two of you? There must be. I'm looking for some juicy kind of gossip. Really, there must be some tension, right?
No, not tension so much. I mean, I think Mervyn summed it up well there. We have slightly different angles that we come from, so there tends to be areas where we will sort of bow to the other one's, not necessarily expertise, but just focus. Mervyn's been working in recruitment for for a very long time. But just in terms of the research that we do, he does have that focus on talent management and learning development, employee experience, and I have the focus on talent acquisition and technology. So we will, defer to the other ones. The other ones view. We kind of we sort of ask for help when we need it. I suppose the biggest challenge with writing like that is you have to be very careful that you don't repeat the same stuff throughout the book. So I think there were a couple of points where Mervyn had written a beautiful several thousand word section, and I'd written a beautiful several thousand word section, and the other one had actually already written about that particular report or that particular topic. So that's, I suppose, where that's where the challenge is. I think the challenge of writing a second book, not necessarily of working together, but writing a second book is a big challenge. I think that we really now understand what bands say when they talk about difficult second albums. When you write a first book, you kind of write down everything that you know, everything that you've ever known. And then you come to write a second book and you're like, oh, right, what do we have to write about? So actually, I think although it was very difficult, writing the second book was probably more rewarding because, we had to go out and really, really work on it, really research it, really get to the bottom of the topic and find out what's going on, speak to some really interesting people, pull in some really interesting research. So writing a second book is a challenge, but it was probably, I was going to say, was it more enjoyable? I'm not quite sure that's the right word, but more satisfying at the end, I think, in terms of what we came up with.
Yeah, it was a different experience as well, because the first book we kind of had planned out what we were going to say, how we were going to say it, the order we were going to say it, and the writing pretty much followed that flow. Whereas the second book, we had started off planning much the same thing, and we'd both written probably a couple of chapters, and then obviously COVID hit, and kind of the everything we were writing about kind of was about to change. And so that was needing to take a step back and then recalibrate kind of a year, 15 months in as to, what we don't want to do is write the post-COVID playbook, because that's going to date very quickly. What we do need to understand is what of what is happening now to the way we work and everything, and kind of how technology is responding to the various challenges and hybrid working and things like that. And what are the bits that clearly are going to impact the next three to 5 years and will become the norm? So what we've been doing over the last 2 years becomes business as usual. So that was quite interesting. And certainly, I found myself going back to change a bit of the chapters I'd already written, but also the kind of going off into a slightly different path. And I suppose going back to one point that Matt said earlier on, we scope out at the beginning what the chapters are going to be. So it's kind of, roughly this is going to be, these chapters are going to be about this, and this. And for each one, we will break that down into 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 little subsections of the things we're going to cover. And so we've almost got that constant check with each other, because it's a master document we keep going in and out of. So we've got that check about, are we going off the tangent? Are we kind of doing something different? Or are we both replicating the same thing? So I think it's nothing we formally have to do. I think informally, we've always got that kind of open eye onto that.
Yeah. And was there a plan always to write a second book? Was that always kind of it, was that always kind of in on the roadmap, or was there pressure from because of the success of the first one, or from the publishers to write a second book? What was that kind of situation?
There definitely, there wasn't a plan not to write. Sorry, there wasn't a plan not to write a second book. if that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, negatives I put in that sentence.
Yes.
So I think it was always a possibility. I think that the first book was really successful. People really liked it. It opened up a lot of opportunities for us, and then a second book kind of became a bit of a no-brainer. But actually, I suppose the thing that really drove it was the topic. Digital talent, looking at digital transformation and digital skills, and it's something that we sort of touched upon a little bit in the first book, but really wanted to sort of dive into in more detail. And it's just a great process writing a book. You just find out so much stuff about, look at so much information and all that kind of stuff. And we sort of asked the publisher what they thought, and they said yes straight away. So it just kind of fell into place. So I don't think there was a roadmap that says, year 1, book 1, year 3, book 2, or whatever it was. It just seemed like the natural and right thing to do.
And is it easier the second time round, or is it harder? Is it just kind of the same? How would you describe Mervyn?
I think it's different. I think it is more difficult because, as I said, you've already written down everything in the first book. However, you know what the process entails, and also you know what happens afterwards. You know what happens when you release a book, the kind of things that people will want to talk about. That within our book ends with a very clear summary and a very clear model that we can then go and talk about to kind of really bring people value from the book. So I think that the things that we learned doing the first book were incredibly useful, and we sort of built on that in the second. I don't know what you think, Merv.
No, I would agree. I think that the first book, as Matt said, it's kind of we wrote about what we knew, and we had both, I suppose, tracked how things were changing, and how what we call the talent journey, the journey from kind of first finding out about an organization to kind of your alumni relationship, was, if you like, one seamless journey underpinned by tech. Now it wasn't a series of stages with beginning, middle, and ends, and so that we kind of knew how we wanted that to flow, and really each chapter was describing, I suppose, each stage along that process, where it was slightly, I won't say more scientific, the second one, but there was a lot more use, I suppose, of external research, because we were, we both go to a lot of events. I've been to a lot of the US conferences. I mean, we both go to HR Tech, to Unleash, and those kind of big expos. But also particularly the user conferences like Influence Greatness, Work Human, kind of Ultimate Connections, those kind of events where you hear real client stories and you really get to dig in. So I think that, we had a lot more to draw from. And I think there were some of the bigger themes that we were tackling, like, leadership in the digital age. What does it mean? What does it, how can we help advise HR people how to help their leaders, kind of thing. So there were some, not challenging ourselves as such, but I mean, some meatier topics for us to kind of do some research on, and really, I suppose, try and get our heads around as how we could write about it and how we could shape it as something which is useful and informative to the audience.
Yeah. And was Digital Talent always going to be the second book, or were there other kind of areas that you were kind of considering exploring, saving for book 4 or something like that?
No, I think this was always a really strong idea, because it just built on the first book. We've seen, really over the last. Sorry, I have a car going past outside the window. Over the last couple of decades, we've just seen this kind of this demand for digital talent and digital skills go through the roof. So it was an obvious thing for us to do. And what was really interesting was actually the pandemic made it even more obvious. Mm-hmm. So we were writing it, and we kind of got to the pandemic, and we realized that we were writing exactly the right book, because funnily enough, a lot of the things that we'd already written about as sort of things that might happen actually happened during the pandemic. So we had to sort of take those out, because, it felt like making this is going to happen in the future. It's already happened. So the pandemic kind of really accelerated what we were writing about, and made it the sort of the perfect choice for for the thing. But this was always going to be the second book. It's just a really logical follow-on from the first, and it really reflects what we're seeing around the markets.
There was never the idea of leaving the first book on a cliffhanger so you could lead into the second book.
Not exactly. No. But you never know. Maybe. I don't know if the second book is it's not really finished on a cliffhanger. But I think between us, we already have a few ideas for a third book. Should Kogan Page wish us to write a third book? Should the general public at large wish us to write a third book?
We're not presupposing anything at this stage, but we would like to write another one. So if you do like this one, please let us know.
Yes.
You need a trilogy, right? That's what it is.
Well, do you know what? That's actually the big thing. We were like, we have to have a trilogy. So we have to write another book with the word talent in it. So it's exceptional talent, digital talent
trilogy, basically. Yeah,
something. The talent trilogy. All the best things are trilogies. So
it's a bit. The aim is it's up there with the Lord of the Rings cycle. Return of the King, Return of the Talent is the third book.
Well, we look forward to that. That was going to be my last question, actually, about the third books, but we covered that. So no, not a problem. Let's talk about the book itself. Okay, let's talk about kind of why don't Mervyn, let's give you a go, because otherwise Matt's going to kind of steal all the limelight.
No.
Let's
you podcasters, it's like a private union, isn't it?
If only. Tell us about the themes of the book and kind of and what the book's about and what we can expect when we're going to read the book.
What's the book about? It's about the digital talent journey. So the first book was very much charted how things were changing, as I said earlier. So I'll try not to repeat exactly the same thing I said earlier. But it's how tech underpinned this seamless journey. And we covered things in that book, like things like performance management, how this was changing to, from rank and yank to kind of ongoing conversations, and kind of how the talent acquisition itself was changing. But this really recasts it for the digital age, because this is one seamless, intuitive happening. It's not, it's not something that can be broken up. So you've got lots of different stakeholders, a bit like a relay race. I use an analogy in one of the earlier chapters about the talent cycle being like a relay race. And historically, the baton keeps getting dropped. We hire somebody, the baton gets dropped because onboarding, whose responsibility is it? And it kind of, but candidates, they expect applying for a job to be like subscribing to Netflix. They, as far as they're concerned, they're doing this stuff online. They expect to know where they stand. They expect you to be taking it seriously, to be letting them know if there's something wrong, if they haven't done something wrong, not just silence means we haven't accepted your subscription, for example. Mm-hmm. And so expectations have changed. And I think that it kind of intensifies the experience that people want. And I think one of the important differences that I've seen over the past 2, 3, 4 years is this concept of experience, candidate experience, employee experience. It's something historically companies were beginning to see that's something they did. We create a great experience for our people. But actually, employee experience is what the employee experience is. And all the research, particularly from those tech companies who are involved with recognition, well-being and things, shows that as far as the employee is concerned, their employee experience is what they experience on a day-to-day basis. It's nothing to do with what their manager thinks they are creating. It's to do with how the employee experiences what the manager does. And that makes huge differences. So, we have a great recognition scheme in place, but then you see research where like 40% say they've not had recognition for 4 months or something. It's kind of, I think it's the reality. For me, it was very much the reality of how this happens. And, the fact that we have so much more data, so much more information, things like talent intelligence, we need to be able to use this in a way that really supports and enables our people. Because if they don't feel supported, enabled, and they don't feel we're on their side, they're not developing, they're going to move. and the kind of already kind of huge number. Over 60% say in research that it's easier to find a job in another company than it is to change jobs in the one they're in at the moment. And so those are the kind of things. Those are the kind of areas that we're tackling in this book to kind of how do we make this better. Anyway, before I rant on, I shall hand over to Matt.
Absolutely, and I think that it's also all about the backdrop to all of this in terms of what's driving it. So every single employer on the planet pretty much is having to undergo some kind of digital transformation. And that was the interesting about COVID is, we thought we were writing for a subset of employers, but during COVID we saw, theaters and restaurants and cinemas and, companies that you'd never imagine would have to be an active part of the digital economy or communicate extensively digitally. We're having to do that, so it's something that affects every single business, and a lot of the backdrop is around the shifting skills, the fact that employers need different skills in their business, and how do they do that? How do they attract people with those skills? How do they develop those skills? What are those skills? How there's points where we kind of take a step out and reflect on some of the systemic issues in terms of education systems giving people the right skills, the huge role that diversity and inclusion plays in this as well. So the book covers a lot of ground with that sort of central digital talent journey driving it forward against this backdrop of skill shortages and changing skills and digitally transforming businesses.
And to give us a bit of a kind of a flavour of what we can almost kind of expect when we kind of get going, what are the kind of chapter titles and things like that we can kind of share with us?
I can read them out. We talk you through the flow of it. I mean, it really we start off by talking about digital skills and digital transformation, and not just digital, not just sort of technical skills, but actually the fact that everyone needs digital skills within a business. We talk about talent acquisition, we talk about talent experience, talent management, leadership. These are all the chapters that Mervyn wrote, so I'm just talking about his chapters. There's a big chapter on diversity and inclusion, and then the book finishes by looking at work technology. How is technology helping with the digital talent journey? What can we see? What are the trends? And then we talk about what we call the sort of the new future of work. It's how are the trends that we've seen growing during the pandemic going to affect the way that work works? And then in the conclusion, we finish off by talking about this sense of total talent management in terms of how companies need to borrow skills, get skills into their business, and really look very holistically at how they manage the different types of workforce that they might have.
So anyone listening, if that hasn't kind of whet your appetite for going and get the book, I don't know what's going to. I without kind of sounding too cheesy, I assume the book is available at all good kind of online retailers, and that very big one online retailer as well, I assume.
Yes, you can certainly buy it from what's the name? I can never get it right. Amazon, was it, or Amazon, or you can get it from Amazon. Obviously, it's better for us if you buy it from Coke and Page. A, we get slightly more from it, and B, Coke and Page are more likely someone else to write a third. And I'm sure there are other places. I'm afraid in Southwest London, I twice a week I go into my local Waterstones bookshop, and it's still not stocked. But you don't expect that. But I believe that most of the big bookshops you get in city centres, I think Coke and Page, some of their books are there in the business section. So whether or not, I've not spotted it anywhere in a big bookshop yet, but I'm always hopeful.
I'm sure it's there. I'm sure it's there. You know what, guys? It's been an absolute pleasure talking me through your kind of working process and the and the themes of the book. Obviously, we will include all of your details in the show notes and links to where everybody can get their copy of the book. Matt, it's been a pleasure to have you on again. Mervyn, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on for the first time. Hopefully, it won't be the last. Maybe for book 3, we'll do this again.
Yes.
Yeah, the return of the talent, whatever we're gonna call it. But for now, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.